Okay, so something happened. The pants don't go past my thighs. Hello everybody and good morning and welcome to my channel. Today I'm really excited to share my journey of making these pants. It has been a fun and a challenging project and I cannot wait to show you the whole step-by-step process, all tips and tricks that I used to make these pants and even some mistakes along the way. So in this video you will see a mix of daily updates and progress, detailed instructions on how I made this pants, and the whole process from start to finish. So let's grab a cup of coffee and dive in. Okay, so this is day one of making my pants. I keep seeing these pants on Pinterest, Instagram and TikTok, and once I saw how much they cost, around 80 to 100 euros, I was like, oh my god, no way, I'll make them myself. So first I started looking for inspiration and created a mood board. This helps me visualize the style, fabric and details I want to incorporate. Creating a mood board is a great way to organize your thoughts and get a clear idea of your design direction. You can see that I went for this very comfy design. There are these cute bows on the side through the length. They have this really nice pattern. I really wanted it in red and white, and that was like the main mood of the inspiration and from what I wanted. Next, I sketched out my design based on the mood board, so I incorporated all the details and all the necessary information for me to then later make a pattern. And after I was happy with the sketch, it was time to make the sketch of the pattern and then start drafting the base of the pattern for pants. So after the sketch was done and the sketch for the pattern was done, I took my measurements and drafted the base of the pattern to ensure a perfect fit. The pattern drafting took me a few hours because it's been a while since I did it the last time, but it was really nice to see how I remembered the whole process, and maybe I will make a video about it in the future. Okay, so day 2 is all about copying and modifying the pattern. I'm transferring the original pattern onto the tracing paper without cutting it because I want to preserve the base for the next time when I am making a new pair of pants. This is just a very simple part of the process where you're just following the lines that you already did. After I had a new copy of the pattern, I was adjusting the pattern to ensure a perfect fit. Something that I wish I would have done is made a mock-up using a cheap material to see if everything was okay, and it would have saved me some time and seam ripping. During this stage, I also lowered the waist. I made the cut on the sides because I wanted the opening for where the bows are going to be, and I also made them a bit wider. After the whole adjusting stage was done, I was ready to cut the paper sewing pattern into 2 separate pieces so that I was able to transfer it on the fabric. Oh my god, just look at this material that I found. It is exactly what I wanted. It's exactly like the ones that I found on the photo references, so I was so excited that I was gonna be having the exact pants that I had in my mind. The material was pretty breathable and pretty light, but it was not as stretchy as I was wanted to be, but I will just keep that in mind while sewing. Before I started this stage, I folded the fabric in half because I wanted to cut 2 pieces of the same pattern piece at the same time, since of course we have the right and the left side of the pants, and when we fold the material we are cutting both of them at the same time, and because they are folded they are mirrored, so we save some time and effort and make sure the accuracy is at its best. So when you're positioning the paper sewing pattern on the fabric, you need to remember a few things that will really help you when you are transferring it to the actual material. Number 1, you want the main line of the pattern to be aligned with the selvage. Number 2, you want to draw the pattern on the wrong side or on the back side of the pattern so that the front side or the face side of the pattern is being clean and clear. Number 3, you really want to pin down the sewing pattern tightly to the material because you don't want it to move and you want to make those lines exactly where they need to be. Number 4 would be use a charcoal for materials, because it's not gonna damage the fabric, and since we might spend a lot of money on the material, you don't want that to be ruined, right? And number 5, I would say that it would be the seam allowance. Make sure that you leave the space for the right seam allowance before cutting out of the material, because trust me, you don't want your pants to be too small. Later, when I cut out the material with the sewing pattern still attached, I transfer the line on the other side. How do I do that? Well, I have this special colorful copying paper. This one right here is yellow, and I have this little roller that transfers the lines to the other side when it's being dragged around. So with the pattern still attached, I put these pieces on this colorful mat and I transfer the lines to the other side so that I will know where to sew and where to attach the pants together. Now that the patterns or the lines are transferred to the other side, I can finally remove the pattern from the fabric. I'm taking out all the pins, and then what I did was I put on top the according front side of the pants, because of course the next part is to sew each pant hole together, but there is a little bit of a process to do that. I usually start with just pinning it together on all the little notches that I did, all the little points, to make sure that the front and the side are aligned. I did that on the side and on the inside of the pants. I am being very careful that I am positioning the needles exactly on the line so that I make sure that the measurements are gonna be correct, and of course that the pattern is gonna turn out the way that I want it. You can see here that after I did the side line, then I went to the inside line and I attached it together. After all the pins were in and the pants were attached, the front and the back, I decided to actually just hand sew it together very fast so that it's gonna be easier for me to then sew it with a sewing machine. This step is not very necessary, but it just made me feel a bit safer and a bit more comfortable with proceeding. This is a very special thread that is very easily ripped apart, and its only role is to just attach the fabric pieces together in these emergency cases. Because of course the fabric acts differently when it's pinned together or when it's sewn together. I did that on both sides again, on the inside and on the outside. Here I am turning the pants around just to see how it looks like now that it's actually sewn together, and because I was happy with how it was looking, it was the time to move to the next stage, which is of course the sewing. I chose a normal straight stitch with a medium separation, and I just first sewn the inside of the pants on the same line that now I attached it with a hand stitch, and after the machine made stitch I removed the handmade stitch with scissors and just pulling it out. And because of the type of the thread, this really doesn't ruin the fabric or anything. I did the whole process from pinning everything together to hand stitching it to sewing it with a machine on both sides, of course on the left and the right side. One of the very important stages that people often neglect is the ironing. Ironing is like 40% of the whole sewing process. It's really important because it really makes sure that the stitches are neat and beautiful and flat, and it really affects the end result. So here I am simply ironing the seam allowance apart and making sure that the stitch is very flat. And then I turned the garment around and I also did it on the face side of the garment just for that extra flatness, I guess. And usually after the ironing, I will secure the seam allowance, which means overlocking it. I like to leave around 1 centimeter of a seam allowance still there overlocked, just in case that I need to alter some things and maybe I need to make something wider or bigger. But in this case, because the pants were already really wide because I wanted that type of design, I was a bit more comfortable with just making that overlocking seam a bit tighter to the actual seam. Now that I had the left and the right part of the pants sewn and overlocked, it was the time to actually put them together, which meant making this seam that goes through the middle. Again, I followed the exact same process, which is first pinning it, then hand stitching it, and then of course using the sewing machine. Now when I am sewing it with a machine, I'm being really careful that the lines in the stitches are aligned. And look at that, the pants are now together, and it's the time to iron the stitch again. Because the stitch goes kind of through the middle, it's a bit harder to make it nice and flat and really iron it to the perfection. So I usually will just kind of try to, like, I don't know, like dress up the ironing board so that I can really get the access to ironing the stitch nice and flat. And of course, like before, we overlock the stitch again. Now this one that goes through the middle. Now after the overlock, I was really excited because finally I had my pants in the state where I could put them on and try them and see how they look, and it didn't go as planned. Okay, so something happened. The pants don't go past my thighs, and I realized that it is because I haven't even thought about how am I gonna put pants on. So now we're just gonna have to like kind of improvise and adapt to the situation. So what I'm gonna do is, if before I thought that there's gonna be this part from my hip a bit lower to like, I don't know, like maybe 30 centimeters, that there's gonna be a seam and then the bows are gonna start. Now what we're gonna do is the bows are gonna start like right from the hip so that I can maybe adjust it, which means that they're gonna be a bit more revealing, but I'm gonna try to deal with that later because I don't want them to look a bit, you know, like trashy or anything. So yeah, my bad. I will think about it the next time. But if you're in the same situation, like be careful about how you're gonna put the pants on. I was also thinking about making a zipper on the side, but I'm not sure it would fix the situation 100%. And so yeah, we're just doing the bows all the way. So because I got myself into that situation, I had to rip apart the seam from the sides because that is where we're gonna be saving this pants, right? So the only thing that I made sure while ripping the seam was that I didn't damage the material. Because of the ripping, I just decided to iron it again, because a lot of the times ironing the material after ripping it apart, like ripping the seam apart, will help to kind of put the fibers back in order so that you don't see these little holes that the stitch made before. So that is kind of what I did. And I also made the fold on the side that is later gonna be the place where I will attach the bows. And because I was a bit bummed out of not fitting into my pants or not being able to put them on and off, I decided to just put the pants away for like a day or two, and I decided to do these little strings that are gonna serve as bows on the sides. So what I did was I made this very simple pattern for the strings for the bows, and I started attaching the sewing pattern to the material and marking it, drawing the correct shape, and then cutting it out of the material. In this stage, it's really important to, of course, again, think about the seam allowance. And something that I figured out later was that the smallest that the seam allowance here can be, the better it is when you are trying to turn it around. Of course, there are a million different ways of doing these little strings, like spaghetti straps or something like that, but I just decided to do it like this. You will see. So after everything was cut apart and I had all the pieces separated in a little bundle, it was the time to again pin the pieces where the stitch has to be. And of course I had to do that like 30 times for all the strings and the bows that are gonna be on the pants. At some point I just decided to put a Netflix show on because it was a very easy task and it didn't require a lot of attention, and that really made it go by very, very fast. Here are all the pinned pieces, and of course the next stage, again, it was just ironing it to assure that everything was just standing the way that I wanted it to. After that, we are back to the sewing machine where I am sewing all the strings where I pinned them down, and repeated the same process 30 times. Then I had to overlock all of them so that they will not be ripping apart or causing any damages on the seam. And then a part that I also didn't expect came, which was turning them around, and oh my god, that was a hard part. It took so much time that again I was just watching movies with it, and thank god that my boyfriend told me to just use a screwdriver because it really made my job way easier turning all of these little parts, and I wish I would find another solution to it, but this was really the only one that I was able to think of in the moment. So I just helped myself with pulling the fabric out of the little tube that I created, and luckily it didn't damage the material and I was able to do it in a few hours. Now I wish I could stop repeating myself and telling you that of course the next stage is to iron these pieces again, but that's just how it is. And as before, here I'm just trying to make this little string as flat as possible so that they're gonna be easy to attach to the pants, and I'm not gonna have a lot of problems tying them once they're attached to the pants. Now, because I haven't protected the seam allowance before, I had to do it now before I attached these little strings on the side. So this is me just overlocking the sides of the pants down the line. And now it comes the attaching part. This was a journey. So how I went about it was I measured the length from the top on one side, and then of course I did it parallel on the same side on the back side. So first I did it on the front and then I did it on the back, and I kind of had it like folded as you can see here, so that I kept comparing and seeing if it was aligned, because of course it's really important for these bows to be aligned so that the front is not pulling the back or the other way around. So I kept repeating the same process, and at some point I made the space between the bows a bit wider, because up there I had to protect it a bit more because I didn't want to show any special spaces, but down there I was a bit more comfortable with just showing a bit of the leg. So I made the bows a bit more separated from each other. And since before I just pinned them, now I had to actually sew them to the pants. I did 2 stitches to really secure the string at one place and make sure that it's not gonna rip away or that it's not gonna be hanging weirdly, and so that I feel safe wearing them and not be afraid that they're just gonna fall apart when I am walking around the city. And the last part that I was saving for the pure end was hem on the length and of course the finishing on the waist. So those were the last few stitches that I did for the pants. What I did was very simple. I just overlocked the edge and made a little fold, iron it, and then sew it. Very, very simple. And I just did that on all sides. And that was it. That was the final stitch. Okay, so I think it's time for the final reveal. And here they are. What do you think? I really like how they turned out. I like the bows, I like the material, I like that they look exactly how I envisioned them. So since now I have the pants right here and they're done, I thought that we could go through some learning experience that I went through during this project and some pros that sewing your own clothes brings, okay? So the first thing, of course, on the learning side of it is that when I messed up the upper part of the pants, which didn't allow me to put them past my thighs, I had to figure out a new solution, and that brought me to just making these extra bows on the sides that now tied, and they let me just put pants up and down, and you know, it turned out to be a really nice thing. I really like how they look like and I wouldn't change it. They kind of have this bikini type of system right now, and I'm really happy that the bows are positioned into like this direction so that they are covering everything that I wouldn't want to show. So that is a really nice thing. So it turned out to be a good thing, but I would just advise you to, in the future, if you're making pants, consider how you're gonna dress them up and dress them down, of course. The second thing would be to really think about how much material you're gonna use. Usually I would advise you to just buy a bit more, like half a meter more than what you think you will need, because just like in my case, I had to make those extra bows, and if I wouldn't have the material, that would be a bit of a problem, especially if they ran out of it in the store that I bought it. So I would advise you to, when you're buying the material, just buy half a meter more. You can always reuse it, you can use it for another project, whatever, but just to be on the safe side, because that really helped me this time. The third thing would be something that I haven't talked about in this video because I just kind of take it for granted, but I know that a lot of people don't know that, or they don't take it seriously, and that would be the pre-washing of the material. Why do we have to pre-wash it? Well, because the material can experience some shrinkage or some discoloration, and we definitely don't want that. This material, you see that it's red and white, and that is a really bad combination to have. So I pre-washed them to make sure that they're not gonna be bleeding and that the pants are not gonna turn out pink in the future. So that is definitely something to consider about before you're starting to cut the fabrics and sewing. Now I think that is kind of it on the negative or the learning side of the project, but then on the positive side, there are quite a few that I really like and really enjoy. And the first one would be that because I am making my own clothes, I am completely in charge of the style, of the measurements, of the material, of the production, of everything. So that gives me a lot of freedom, and of course I make sure that I hopefully like the garments that I'm making, and of course that it fits my body regardless of my shape or my size. So that is something really nice that you control and that you can experience when you are making your own clothes when you are sewing. Another thing would be that making my own clothes is a bit cheaper, at least for me, than going and buying them in the store. So that is really nice. Another thing is that sewing can be very relaxing, and in this stressful world that we live in, who doesn't need some type of outlet to just have a nice hobby that relaxes them and puts their minds to ease? And I don't know, it's just meditative if you want to think about it like that. And maybe the last benefit that sewing your own clothes really brings is that you are hopefully buying less fast fashion produced clothing and making more of your own that are more sustainable. We all know that fast fashion is a real problem right now, and that with all the waste, they're really bad for the environment and for the society. So by not buying there and making your own clothes, you're taking a small step into maybe a better future, into the right direction. And I think that is a really nice part of sewing, like a little added benefit. And that would be it. I hope you liked the video. I hope you like the pants. If you would like to see me make something else, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!